Today, we welcome in one of the greats, one of the all-time black shirt names, Mr. Jason Peter, on the horn with us right now. Jason, first of all, thanks for joining us, man. How are things going with you?
Things are all right in this crazy world that we're living in, but I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you bet. Well, this is the greatest games of the 1994 season. Of course, everybody remembers that with the Bull victory over Miami. Coach Osborne finally getting his national championship that he so badly deserved. Jason, I think from all of your former teammates that I've talked to over the years, the story really begins in what happened the previous year in 1993, the year that you redshirted when you were here in Lincoln. What was the mood of the team following that Florida State game and really the entire offseason that led up to that 94 season?
Yeah, it really did start, walking off the field there against Florida State. And I want to say from the moment I know that we all got back from, the little bit of break that we had after the game, I feel like there was that whole minute 36 seconds that was put up on the scoreboard pretty immediately, I think, as soon as we returned. And that was just kind of, the whole storyline and our motto, the whole unfinished business sort of deal. And we felt like we were the better team against Florida State. We felt like we outplayed them. We felt like we did everything we were supposed to do, except at the end of the regulation, at the end of time, they had more points than us. And there was a handful of questionable calls as well. And, a funny story, I ended up playing with William Floyd, who was the fullback for Florida State. He was in Carolina with me for a year or two, and you get to know these guys when they're your teammates, and so I pulled him aside one time and I said, no, it's just me and you. Tell me the truth. He's like, oh. He goes, I fumbled that ball. He goes, it was clear as day. He goes, that ball was out before I ever crossed the goal line. And but that was the day and age that we kind of lived in back then. There wasn't really instant replay, and you didn't have 15 different camera angles like you do now. And we just kind of we lived with it. But at the end of the day, it turned out to be a good thing, I think. There's no guarantee that if we win that game that we come back as motivated. You just never know. And I think it really just kind of, like you had mentioned before, it really just kind of set the tone for the entire 1994 season. And it was probably, hey, I apologize. I got dogs here that I guess it's getting close to feeding time, so they're all barking. But we were just really highly motivated, and every practice, every meeting, it was just constantly that thing that was hanging over our shoulder, and we never really kind of just took a day off, so to speak. That was a year that we were not going to be denied, I think, a chance at winning, a national championship.
I co-host Husker Game Day with one of your former teammates, Brendan Stye, obviously on the other side of the ball every Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
And usually, inevitably, every week, every other week, we end up talking about locker room dynamics with the current team. And a lot of the things that we talk about, Jason, stemmed from your era about locker room behavior, policing each other, not having the coaches or TO having to watch over you. How much of that was in place before the 94 season, and how much of that 93 impact, I guess, is, for lack of a better term, I'm going to call it, did that begin between those two seasons? That kind of locker room culture, when was that kind of put in place of all the responsibility falling on the team?
Yeah, I think for sure in 94, I think from a leadership point of view, I think it was it was certainly, I think, in place. I think it just continued to grow and grow. Because, I mean, there had been some really, really good teams at Nebraska prior to even, 1993. I mean, there were a lot of teams that kind of made it down to the last game of the year and then just ultimately didn't have enough. But I think for this group of guys, and, like you mentioned, I was a red shirt in 1993, but still, you're doing everything with the team. You're just not traveling. You're not playing in games, but you get to witness things. And I think for the guys that were returning, I think it was an opportunity to look at 93, not only that we felt like we had won the game, but also that whatever Coach Osborne was preaching to us, or X's and O's, or whatever Coach McBride was doing, or Kevin Steele, or Coach Tenneper, whatever they're doing is right. It's working. And when we go out and we execute and we do the things that they want us to do, we can beat anybody in the country, because, at the time, it was all about the Florida schools. And so I think seeing that was big, but I just think then the leadership kind of, got taken up a notch. And it was just this, kind of like I mentioned, this refusal to lose and to not be denied. And, Nebraska was kind of like, it was, there were a lot of people, especially the national guys, who would be like, oh yeah, they kind of beat up on everybody on their schedule, and then they come and they got to play, a team from Florida or from California, a team that's got a lot of team speed, and they just can't hang. They're just kind of these big guys from Nebraska that ultimately get outclassed, the last game of the year. Well, I just think at that point, the entire coaching staff had gone out and they had changed the defense, for that 93 season. And they went out and they were recruiting different kids, obviously. But I think they also started to look maybe a little bit deeper, and they wanted guys that just wanted to win, I think they looked deeper, into their eyes, into their souls, more so than just saying, oh, this guy can, run a 4.3, or this guy's caught, 100 balls, in his high school senior year. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. It was just, I think that now that they had, the coaches knew what they had actually worked. Now I think they could kind of, run with it, and now they can start looking, into the tinier details. And I think that was important to them to have kids that would come from winning programs and high schools, whether it be New Jersey, Texas, California, you name it. So I think when you kind of bring those sort of guys together who are just competitors, and the worst thing in the world to them is losing, I just think ultimately it just kind of gets continued to the bar gets raised and raised and raised, and before you know it, it's like Tuesdays and Wednesdays are becoming more violent and more physical than Saturdays. You're getting to a point where they're having to tell people, us kids to slow it down, because just competing with each other was, it was like a war out there. And I just think that it just kind of, that attitude, it just ran throughout the entire team. And, people talk all the time about the captains and the leaders on those teams, but the reality was there was, we had 150 guys on those teams. There were 100 guys that could probably all have been captains. It was just, they went out and they that was something that they wanted in all of their players. It was the ability to lead, and it wasn't something that was just a natural. A lot of people, they talk about, especially when I was doing media and stuff, and I would talk about leadership, and they say, "Oh, well, it's easy for you. It came easy. You're a natural or whatever." And it's like, no, it's not. It's something that when you came into the program, it was something that was looked very highly upon, by your peers and by the coaching staff. And you paid attention to the guys that were captains that year or were, kind of the field generals, and you watched them and you listened, like you didn't talk back then, you listened. And I think now sometimes, the kids come in and freshmen, they play such a big role, or they're expected to play, or they want to play. And sometimes there's too much talking going on and not enough listening. And I think that was something that we all did, back then. There was a time where you got the opportunity to speak, but when you were young, you just kind of you did what was being asked of you. You practiced, you went to school, but most of all, you kind of listened and you just watched guys and how they went about their business. I mean, I'd watch everything that Trev Alberts did. To me, he was just like, even though he was an outside linebacker / defensive end, he was a guy that, God, man, you just looked at him and it's like, this guy knows what he's doing. This guy has got his what together. And it's like, I want to hopefully when I'm, a senior, like people are looking at me that way, and you watch and you learn. And then, it's just natural that there are guys within your own position group. So Kevin Raymakers was kind of the senior when I was a freshman, and just watching, the way that Kevin went about his business and doing all that. And it was just, leadership was kind of something that was expected of you the same way that you were, expected to know your playbook. And I just think on that 94 team, it was, I'm trying to think who the captains. I know there was probably Brendan was maybe a captain, right? Wiegert, Terry Keneally maybe, I think, and maybe Eddie Stewart. And, those are guys that they had obviously a couple of them are Nebraskans, so you kind of learn. They bring the whole, we grew up loving this team. You really know what the school and the football program means to somebody when you see it through the eyes of a Nebraskan. And it really makes you appreciate, the entire thing but the work ethic and what have you. And speaking of, the offensive line and Brendan, you mentioned, I mean, that was kind of the first year, I think, that the pipeline came together and they kind of got tagged that. There was a lot of things that were happening in the program at that time that, I mean, are still around today, and I think are still kind of the benchmark of what people expect, or what, where they've kind of set the standard. I mean, that 94 offensive line, that is the standard. I mean, when people talk about the pipeline, that's where my mind goes straight to. And they were almost a leader in their own right. I mean, it was just kind of like, well, what does the pipeline think? And it was like five that kind of think as one. And, it was something that was not just off the field, but obviously on the field. And it was just like this close-knit group of guys. And we did want to handle things, kind of internally. We didn't want to burden Coach Osborne with things that were, I don't know, just dumb for, one way of describing it. He shouldn't have to be burdened with stuff when one of us doesn't go to class or something. So I think that's also, kind of when the Unity Council had started to be formed as well. And this way, coaches can coach, right? I mean, let them worry about putting together a game plan to beat Colorado, not worrying about if, freshman Jason Peters going to class or not. So, it was just, I think everybody was kind of like maturing in a way or evolving, I think, whether it be coaches, players. And I just think there had been a new standard kind of set when we came back from Florida State. And it was just kind of the way that it was. I really didn't know much else because I came in, and that was the year that we went and we played Florida State. So I've only known, kind of great football. I've never seen or never had to experience bad years. I mean, the worst year that I had was ultimately, my junior year where we lost 2 games. And that was, it was like the state was burning down. So there was a standard that had been set. And it was, I'm fortunate. I know that I'm very, very fortunate that, and I think if you ask any of those guys that we came into the program when we did. But I mean, we know that we worked very hard to maintain and to elevate the program, but we also realize that we're very fortunate that we just kind of, came in when we did.
Yeah, well said. Jason Peter, former Husker Blackshirt, is our guest here on our Cornhusker Conversation. Jason, there was a lot that happened in that 94 season. It was anything but a smooth ride for you guys to the national championship. I know when you have one goal in mind, and that being the ultimate goal of a national championship, it may be easy at times to kind of just look toward that, maybe look toward that Oklahoma game, and then obviously to the very end of wherever, whoever you may play at the end. But it didn't seem to me, reliving this season, that you guys had that ability based on what was happening week to week. Just what was it like progressing through this season with so many different avenues of adversity hitting you guys in the face?
Yeah, and really just from a respect standpoint, I don't know if even coming home after that Orange Bowl, if national media or probably even local, I'm sure to a certain degree, even, thought we were right there on the cusp of something that was, going to be great. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of stuff. There were several incidents, in the law that had happened, and it was just it was something where we just had to kind of decide if we wanted to be a great football team or not. But even with people criticizing from the outside, it seemed like every shot that was thrown upon us, it just kind of made us put another layer of bricks, on our wall that surrounded us, and ultimately making us closer and closer. And it really carried on, through, I don't know, that was just the way that the program was, as I knew it. You just you leaned on one another, through good times and through bad. Coach Osborne obviously led us, and it's funny because trying to, obviously knowing that we were going to do this interview, I was like, oh, I gotta go back and see if there's like a 94 recap or something on TV, because all the games they run together for me, and sometimes it's hard to separate which one happened in which year. But I just think having Coach Osborne and the example that he set, I think, for all of us, and not wanting to let him down. When people would take shots on him, whether it be for can't win the big one, or whether it's the way he handled something off of the field. It was like adding fuel to our fire, and it's something I just think that you'd be hard to find somebody on any of his rosters that just whether 20, 30, 40 years later just had something negative to say about him. I think no matter who you were, he treated guys all the same. Now, did he end up spending more time with certain guys than other? Yeah, naturally. I think you probably, as a coach, you're going to end up spending more time, with guys that are playing. But during the week, it was he treated, the fourth team or fifth team, scout team center. He'd spend just much time with him conversing, over how his life is, how school, how his parents are. Is no different than the guy, who's a starting center or the starting defensive tackle. And when we would see and hear things that people taking shots on coach, it just made us more determined. And it was something, I think when you look at that season, even starting off the way that we did and having, the quarterback situation where Tommy goes down and then Brooke comes in, and then Brooke, with the collapsed lung, and then ultimately at the end of the year, you're dealing with, a quarterback competition, and then, even in the Orange Bowl game itself, and one guy starting at the next guy coming in and going back and forth. And it was one heck of a season, and really just kind of, I think I don't want to say out of nowhere. I don't know what exactly where we were preseason ranked. My guess is probably outside of, top 5. But I'm not for sure. But even I think the first few games that we played, I don't know if National was really buying into us. I think maybe after we went and after UCLA was in town, and we put a number on them, I believe, and then it was really I think when we played Colorado. Colorado came in with that all-star cast, and that to this day was for a day game. I just remember Memorial Stadium just being just completely bananas. It was just a different environment than I had ever seen before, and it was just, knew something spectacular was about to happen. I don't think anybody sat in their seat for, the entire game. And it was just you think about the guys that they brought in, Cordell Stewart, Rashawn Salam, Westbrook, all the guys that they had on defense. And, I think that was ultimately the game then where people, they kind of had to, to take notice of what we were doing out here. It shouldn't have had to take that long, but ultimately I think it did. And we just never looked back.
No doubt. Fun year for sure. Jason, we've taken a lot of your time, but before we let you go, you mentioned being hard to recollect in particular games, and as it should be. That's a long time, a lot of games to remember, but something that you probably haven't forgotten is the impact that Nebraska had on you. I know you're still Husker through and through. You're a huge part to the program now. You mean so much to what's happening over at the stadium right now. You and your brother, obviously, from the state of New Jersey. First, I guess this is a two-part question. What was it about Nebraska? Earlier you were talking about recruiting and having guys like Tommy from Florida and Brendan and Lawrence from California and you and your brother from New Jersey. You had guys from all over. What was it about Nebraska that was attractive to you as a prospect? And then obviously hindsight today, the second part to the question is what type of impact it had on you?
Yeah. Even as a 17-year-old, I could tell from, and my recruitment was different than Christian's. Christian was he was originally getting recruited by everybody, and then about an hour before his first game, his senior year at high school, the New Jersey high school whatever athletic committee declared him ineligible to play. So he didn't play his senior year, and he really only had two schools that continued to recruit him. One was Temple, and the other one was Nebraska. So it was an easy decision for Christian to come out here, but I, pretty much had everybody recruiting me, and certainly having a sibling out here was a big plus. But I was also at home. My parents were very, encouraged me to make my own path and not to be, in Christian's shadow. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, I just felt the most comfortable out here. But a big part of it was, even as a 17-year-old, and you have all these head coaches that are coming into your living room, and you got some that are sitting there, and your parents are sitting at the same table, and this guy is telling you that you want to wear number 95 next year. Yeah, no problem. It doesn't matter that there's a senior returning 3-year starter who's a Lombardi trophy candidate. You'll have that's your number. Do you know what I mean? And then it's like you have Coach Osborne that comes in and he's like, we'll pay for your education. We'll give you the opportunity to play football. What you do with it is ultimately up to you and how hard you work, but there's nothing that you can achieve or attain while here at the university. It's up to you. But first, you have to make sure that, you're eligible and you're taking care of your classwork before, you're able to focus on athletics. And even as a 17-year-old, I knew okay, that to me sounds more right. Like the other one, it kind of had a lot of BS to it, the other scenario. And it was just, it's like sometimes I think, we think that we have to show them, all the bells and whistles. And I get, you got to keep up with the Joneses in facilities and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I think kids, they just want to be, they want to be treated and talked to, with some truth. And I think a lot of kids, sometimes we don't give them the benefit of the doubt. We think they just want to eat up oh, yeah, you're going to come in, you're going to be a 3-year, 4-year starter, you're going to be a first-round draft pick, and that can only happen here at this university. And it's like, I think there's a lot of kids out there that have good heads on their shoulders, and nowadays it seems like whether their parents played or they got an uncle that played, someone, who can kind of give them the ins and outs of it. But so I think at the end of the day, that was probably it for me. It was, Coach Osborne, and it just seemed like it was the right situation for me. And I never looked back. Now, I know there was a second part to that question. I can't remember what exactly it was. You'll have to refresh my memory on the second part.
Yeah, just the hindsight now. I mean, that was before your journey. Now, several years after being a huge part of the program. Now, what type of impact it had on you?
Yeah. So I mean, and the program now. I mean, obviously, I'm back. I'm living in the state, for the last 12 years, and it's home. My kids are in school here, and I don't, envision ever leaving. It's just it's meant the world to me. I mean, when I went through all that stuff, following the NFL with addiction to pain pills and stuff, and I mean, Ben, the amount of like mail and stuff that I would get from people from Nebraska that say, you ever need a place, you ever need someone to talk to. Yeah, I mean, just letters and letters and letters. It's just like, man, I just don't know if you get that anywhere else. I mean, these people, like, they truly have like this vested interest with the program, and it doing well, and just making sure that like that that they're behind you. And for us, it was something that was reminded to us every Saturday when we went out there, and Coach McBride would talk to the defensive line. He'd give us some words of encouragement, and then he'd say the same thing. Make sure you go out and you play for the people that you love, and you play for your family and everything. And he goes, most of all, you play for those fans, because without them, none of this is possible. And so we were reminded of it. And yeah, the program, it just, you'd always hear people say that it was, even playing in the NFL, just, it will never be the same, especially with the experience that we had, the guys, in those 90s teams. I mean, with just the amount of success that we had. And it's true. And it's not just because, I played for Carolina and, we weren't very good. I think you even talk to guys like Grant and guys that played, on teams that went to Super Bowl, and their experience, sure, playing in the Super Bowl, it's great, and having success, but nothing that compares to at least that time, that mid-90s run that we were on, where it was just, the winning was great, but like the locker room and the camaraderie and the friendships were even better. And to this day, I mean, even prior to me moving back here, I was closer to guys my college team than I was with guys, in the NFL. And so I just wanted to come back, and I had the opportunity, to come back and do some media and stuff. And I'm not a educated sports, sort of journalist or whatever. I mean, I would get on and I would just speak from the heart, and I wanted the program to succeed, but there were also points along the way where I didn't feel like that was things that were happening were up to kind of the Nebraska standard, and I voiced them. And I was a big proponent of getting Scott here, because I think he is, without question, even still with the troubles that we've had the first couple of years, I don't think people necessarily realized how bad of a situation or how things, it was almost kind of at times a house of cards. And more times than not, I think most of the fan base saw, the house crumble, but it went even deeper than that. Even people kind of in your own building that are kind of, rowing in the opposite direction. And it's made it hard, and they're finally getting everything cleaned up, and it's Scott still is the guy that I'm convinced we'll get it back, and he knows that he can ask me for anything, and I would do it. And it's not that Scott and I were so tight through college. He just knows that I love this program and want nothing more than to have these kids experience something that was even remotely close to what we experienced back then, because it was great. And I think, like I said, most guys will probably have similar experiences in the way that they talk about it. It was just it was second to none, and we all, I think, cherish it very deeply now with as we get older and more years put in between now and back then. I think we all start to appreciate and realize how very special, of a time it was. And, so, I love being back here and love, obviously, with Scott getting to be more inside the ropes and being able just to help out, I think, more, because that's, I think what we all want. We just want this thing going back in the right direction, and I'm convinced that we'll get there.
Yeah,
even if we don't play this year, which I don't know. I sent Scott a text last night. I said enough is enough. Okay, let's go. I'm watching 30-year-old freshmen from BYU beat up, undersized Naval Academy guys, step too slow, guys. I said we need to be playing some football.
Yeah, there's a reason why we're running the 1994 season on Saturdays when you and I should be having this conversation on the sideline with 90,000 people at our backs. But yet here we are. Jason, this was a lot of fun, man. Thank you so much for chatting with us, reminiscing with us, and really setting the tone for what's going to be. I know for the fans, anytime we talk about this stuff, they just eat it up. They love it. They love hearing from you players, and no better way to start our 13-week series off than this right here. Jason, thanks so much. Look forward to hopefully seeing on a football sideline here real soon, but if not, we really do appreciate the time and wish you the best. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you guys having me. Thanks. Take care.